Hi, everybody. Welcome to Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's get a quick take on Colorado Attorney General John Suthers announcing this week that he will run for mayor of Colorado Springs. He is term limited in his current position, and he says he will run regardless of whether the current mayor decides to run for re-election. Patty Calhoun, was it surprising to hear that one of the top-tier statewide elected Republicans was going for mayor of Colorado Springs?
Actually, no, because this has been rumored for a long time, and many activists on both sides of the same-sex marriage issue have been talking about he's positioning himself just for a run in El Paso County as Colorado Springs mayor. We did a Q&A with John Suthers in this week's paper, which is a really interesting read. And clearly what he's doing is doing what the AG is supposed to do, which is upholding the letter of the law in Colorado. And in this case, something Colorado voters voted for 8 years ago, whether or not Colorado voters agree with it now. So it was an interesting interview. You certainly understand that John Suthers believes in public service if he wants that job.
David Kopel, Independence Institute research director and a professor at DU Law School. What did you make of the announcement, and does this hurt Republicans having one of their top-tier guys go to a smaller civic position?
No, because Cynthia Kaufman, who's the Republican nominee, everybody agrees she's a strong candidate, as is the Democratic nominee, Don Quick. This is an example of how term limits work. There was a concern that this would deprive the public of the opportunity to choose experienced public servants, and with John Suthers, who was first elected DA in El Paso County many years ago, he's continuing, or attempting to, his long elective career. A good analogy is Bill Armstrong, who served in the state legislature and then in the U.S. House and then in the U.S. Senate. This is before term limits, but nothing he did in his own very long career would have ever exceeded the term limits for any given office. So I think it shows term limits working effectively.
Ed Seelever, reporter from the Denver Business Journal, welcome back to the table. What did you make of the Suthers announcement?
Well, again, I didn't think it was much of a surprise. In fact, I had been told by a Republican lawmaker at the Capitol this session who was also eyeing this race that somebody's going to run against the current mayor, because you're going to be electing a Republican in Colorado Springs, but the current mayor seemed to not want to work with even his own allies in many things. So it was less a question of a change in political direction than a change in style. And Suthers has really always been known for that middle ground style. He's certainly Republican in his views, but he's been very fair. I mean, many people have talked about him as being the least partisan of all of the constitutional officers. And let's remember, too, this isn't a bad job. Colorado Springs is the second largest city in the state. So I think if a well-known Democrat were to run for Denver mayor, we wouldn't be questioning that. This is just doing the same thing, just one step down.
And new to the table, Vic Vela, a reporter from Colorado Community Media. Thank you for joining us. What did you make of the announcement?
You know, to Ed's point about Suthers being fair, I think that's spot on. I mean, he stayed out of that primary for the most part between Waller and Kaufman until he actually said, "Okay, I support my deputy," and that was a big deal because she won at the assembly pretty handily. Yeah, folks, it's a good fit for him, and if there's any, we get a little jaded talking about politics nowadays, but there is something romantic about stepping down from a big office to a smaller office. You know, like Ed said, it's Colorado Springs, it's not exactly small, but his style of politics, his brand, and the gay marriage stuff is really going to fly well in the Springs if he's successful.
Cory Gardner released 2 new campaign ads this week focused on convincing voters that he is a new kind of Republican. In one, he advocates for over-the-counter access to birth control, and the other highlights his efforts regarding renewable energy. Meanwhile, the Udall campaign released a highly critical memo of Gardner on the eve of their Club 20 debate in Grand Junction happening tomorrow on Saturday. Patty, take your pick. We have some new advertisements in the Senate campaign, a blistering memo reported by Lynn Bartles earlier today. What do you think?
Well, if you're talking about whether or not Cory Gardner is a new kind of Republican, what he really is a new kind of Republican Cory Gardner. And we will see as the campaign goes on for the next 2 months, he will be bitten by everything he's ever said about personhood, about abortion, about birth control. We will we will see more on wind energy. Who would have thought we would be talking about wind energy rather than fracking? But so Cory Gardner will soon sound, I think, a lot like the old Cory Gardner. And we'll find out really tomorrow night when the campaign season truly kicks off on the Western Slope with Club 20, where you're going to have both the gubernatorial candidates, the major party gubernatorial candidates, sorry, Mr. Hempy, who didn't make it, and the major party Senate candidates debating. It's going to be interesting because it's not the Front Range. They're going to be debating in a rural area, or Grand Junction, but in an area surrounded by a lot of rural commissioners, a lot of smaller area politicians who have very big concerns that specifically deal with their land, deal with their livelihoods. And I think we'll get into some new campaign issues that will be talked about for maybe a week and then forgotten as we start getting to the personal things again, like abortion, like the death penalty. But I think Cory Gardner will continue to see what resonates the most. Can he get more women to vote for him? Can he get more Latinos? Because polling now shows that he may even be ahead of Udall, and the Udall troops are worried. Hickenlooper starting his campaign TV ads a week early just because he's getting so beaten up by the Republican governors with their buys. So it is going to be a heated, ugly, ugly campaign for the next 2 months.
And you're right about Club 20. They usually kick off the season with their debates. We're going to be starting our debates here at Colorado Public Television next Friday, September 12th at 7 p.m. In fact, bringing on some of the third-party candidates in the U.S. Senate and the governor's race. You talked about Harry Hempy. He'll be joined by the other alternate party candidates. So that's next Friday at 7 p.m. David, as we look at the Gardner-Udall race, the new ads, new kind of Republican, do you think that's going to help him when it comes to unaffiliated voters?
Probably, yes. An interesting thing is Mark Udall is running as a new kind of Mark Udall in the sense he's running as if he were Diana DeGette. Diana DeGette, for whom reproductive rights have been one of her core top issues she's fought on from the moment she entered public affairs. Mark Udall and Cory Gardner, if you look at their press releases, their legislative activity, that's been roughly barely cracking the top 50, maybe not even the top 100 for either of them. If they wanted to have a debate about something neither's been involved in much but is important and they really disagree, abortion would be a good thing. I mean, there's a profound difference between the two of them on that issue. But, apparently because of what the focus groups say, Udall's made this campaign about trying to frighten low information young female voters into thinking that Cory Gardner is going to take away their birth control. And so Cory Gardner is now outflanking Udall on the left on this by saying, and I think rightly, that birth control pills should be something you can buy over the counter. They shouldn't be something you got to visit a doctor for to get a prescription, and that you have to get through your employer-based health plan. So Bobby Jindal, the governor of Louisiana, has also said the same thing about birth control pills. On the wind power, Cory Gardner and Mark Udall are both being old, traditional Demo-publicans of that one-party oligopoly whose job is to take money from the productive, working part of the economy and give it to the parasitical takers in the economy, of whom the wind welfare lobby is certainly one of them. Now, you can't, in terms of welfare for wind, you cannot possibly outdo Mark Udall. He is truly and sincerely committed to that and has worked very hard on it. And I guess Gardner's trying to neutralize that some by saying, hey, I was for corporate welfare for big wind as well. But if you really want wind welfare, Mark Udall is clearly the best champion one could possibly have.
And I'm not sure if either the Demo-publican or the wind welfare are going to be winning taglines for Cory Gardner. But what do you make of his new ads and the upcoming Club 20 debate, which is already off to a rousing start if you look at just the memos?
Well, I think the key thing about Cory Gardner saying he's a new kind of Republican is that he is new and that he recognizes the Republican brand has been stained over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, even in their 2010 take back of the U.S. House, polls afterwards showed that people weren't saying the Republican Party is great. They were saying, they're better than those losers that were in charge of it before. And so by putting himself out there, just with the tagline, New Republican, he sends across this message that says, I really want to do something different. In fact, it's worth noting, and I know there have been some stories this week about Gardner bragging about a wind energy bill that actually did nothing. But I actually was covering that session, and remember, that was early in Bill Ritter's career, and he had come in saying, we're going to make alternative energy a big deal, and a lot of people just stood up and said, no, 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 no. And Gardner and Josh Penry were the two in particular that I remember that said, okay, we don't like a lot of these ideas, but let's work on some things. And Gardner's bill on trying to make it easier to get transmission lines put down. It was one of the most practical things that passed in the 2007 session that basically said, well, I'm not going to subsidize your wind energy, but boy, I mean, let's at least make sure that if you're going to take wind energy, it's going to be able to be used by other people. And I think that may also be where the newness is, because Gardner is a proactive Republican. And I think both Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. Congress can fail to live up to that level right now, sitting on their hands, doing nothing, rehashing arguments that have been going on for years. Gardner has shown in his career that he is actually going to bring forward ideas that, clearly some people like Dave may not like, and that's fine. But that's really where the new label should be, is I'm going to go there, I'm going to do things which you haven't seen Congress do in a long time. And maybe that is where he's going to win the most points with independents on this.
Vic, it wasn't like Cory Gardner was going to come out and say, I'm an old traditional Republican, that's not going to win any votes. But will new kind of Republican win him some unaffiliated voters?
He kind of has to. And to Ted's point, I mean, the branding has taken a hit, especially in key demographics like Latino and women. But this campaign between Udall and Gardner has been fascinating in terms of how they court women. The way they are courting women, frankly, there should be a restraining order against the two of them, because it's just over the top with these ads. Gardner comes out with this ad where he's talking about how surrounded by women like he's a Greek god or something, and saying how birth control should be cheap and available around the clock, like it's nachos from 7-Eleven or something. And and then the Democrats respond by oh, Cory Gardner wants to restrict a women's right to choose. Cory Gardner wants to take away your birth control. Cory Gardner wants to cancel the Lifetime network. I mean, it's everything about this campaign has just been, frankly, a little hilarious. And we are getting into that silly season in politics where we're going to be seeing a lot more of it.
This show is very familiar with the silly season. That's what we do every Friday. On Wednesday, protesters gathered outside the Colorado Democratic Party's office to express their concern over the rollout of a new licensing program for undocumented immigrants. Meanwhile, on Thursday, a group of Latino state legislators denounced Bob Beaupre's immigration stance related to his August comments about securing the Mexican border. David, immigration's always been a huge issue, but it was interesting this week to see the two different angles and to see the Democrats under fire, as well as Bob Beaupre coming under increasing fire from comments he made in August. What do you think?
Well, I think the Republican gubernatorial candidate being criticized by Democratic state legislators is not a shocking development. It is surprising, the illegal alien protests, that their driver's licenses are not being sufficiently provided quickly enough and in enough places. In Mexico, they don't give driver's licenses or anything else to illegal aliens. Article 3 of the Mexican Constitution, Article 33, forbids all foreigners, including illegal ones in Mexico, from participating in Mexican elections in any way. My guess is that as long as the Colorado election system operates properly so that people can't vote illegally, then people whose presence in this country following an illegal entry into the country remains a continuing crime are not going to be a powerful voting bloc in terms of asserting that the government is not providing them with what they want quickly enough.
And I'm sure that from the comments from the Democratic Party, this seemed to come as a surprise, and they were backpedaling and talking about it. Is it going to make a big difference? Do you think there's going to be a reaction there? What do you make of what the Democrats should or will do about this?
Well, first of all, I think it's very interesting to see that illegal immigration is becoming a big issue in a governor's race, since most federal court decisions have said, hey, this is not the state's job, it's the federal government's job. Now, of course, this may be a reaction to the federal government doing absolutely nothing on this issue, but it is interesting this now suddenly become a state issue. even people who have backed Beaupre have told me they think there is a ceiling to the amount of votes he can get, that there's going to be a point where he's not going to be able to go any higher. And what really needs to happen is that a third-party candidate needs to peel some away, which is extremely unlikely to happen looking at the race this year, or Hickenlooper's backers just need to check nobody's name on that vote. And what this effort is doing is to the latter. I don't think you're going to see Bob Beaupre, for all of his good intentions of talking about small business and helping out Hispanic small business owners, get a big percentage of the Hispanic vote. And so seeing efforts like this, in which Democrats are coming out and saying, hey, Democrat, we're not going to back you, doesn't mean there's something going to jump to Beaupre, but it may peel enough some of those voters away from Hickenlooper to be what really needs to happen. I mean, and it's not just them. I mean, it's also going to be, say, if environmentalists decide, I'm not going to punch anyone's name on this line, they're certainly not going to go vote for Beaupre, but Hickenlooper may have done enough where they say, I'm not going to back him either. And that's part of the bigger storyline, which is, can Hickenlooper lose enough of the support he got from his handy win in 2010 to make this a really close or even a loss for him at this point? Lastly, I think it is also interesting that after years, 6-8 years of us seeing Republicans kind of eat their own and say, you don't agree with us on everything, we're not voting for you, we are finally seeing Democrats do that. It's good we got some equality in the political system now.
It's quite an effort to make bipartisanship of really a reality in Colorado. Vic, some of this, the pressure came on actually how it was being implemented from the legislative side. Do state Democrats need to do something about this, or is this a small protest that really is not going to make a difference?
I think it's the latter. I mean, look, you always are concerned about turnout among your base in an off-year election, any election. But I got to tell you, Latinos, it's a huge problem for Republicans, the voting bloc. You look at the national numbers. George W. won about 40% of the Latino vote when he in 2004. 2008, McCain won about 31%, and Romney took about 27%. That's not good when a demographic is going up and up and up, and your numbers in getting them are going down. And you're turning Nevada into a blue state. You're turning Colorado into a blue state. I don't know what they're going to do in 20 years when Texas is a purple state. This is more of a problem for Republicans. Look, people aren't crazy about President Obama right now. His approval ratings are abysmal, and nobody likes him. The love affair is over. But two demographics that Democrats can usually count on are women and Latinos. Now, the question, and as you can see how important the Latino vote is in Colorado, look at the 6th congressional district race, Mike Kaufman and Andrew Romanoff. They're going to debate in Spanish. That's how important that demographic is in that particular district, which is a fascinating district. But now there is a difference between support and showing up. And yes, Latinos, by and large, support Democrats and Democratic policies. But will they show up at the polls in November when Obama isn't at the top of the ticket, when Hillary Clinton isn't at the top of the ticket yet? That's the question.
Patty, wrap it up for us.
Well, it is interesting to see as different slices of the demographics realize what kind of power they're going to have here. Sorry, white men, don't think it's going to happen, but the Latinos, that they can go both for what they want from the Democrats, which really has a lot less to do with who's in the governor's office than they're peeved that this license rollout is taking a lot longer than they thought it would. And anyone who's ever sat over at Mississippi waiting for their driver's license for a while knows it doesn't matter really what your ethnic background is. You are going to wait for that driver's license. It's interesting that they're going after the Democrats, that we had like the hiccup again on the Bob Beaupre comments, which we hashed over last week, and we're going to have 2 more months of really stupid things that politicians are going to say, especially if they're debating in Spanish. So there is going to be no shortage of ways that Latinos who do not vote in one block can go after the candidates, and women, if they were smart and also voted in one block, which they don't. You're right. They should go for restraining orders against both Gardner and Udall, because those women, the Gardner ads with the woman narrator, I mean, they're just really, really bad.
While still focused on keeping its majority, the Democratic leadership of the State House is already talking about the race for the next Speaker of the House. If Democrats retain their majority, the likely battle will be between the current Majority Leader, Representative Dickie Lee Hullinghorst, and Assistant Majority Leader, Representative Dan Pabon. Ed, you're one of our two legislative reporters here at the table. I know this is, we're far away from November, but the fact that it's even making any sort of headlines right now is interesting. Who do you think has the upper hand at this point?
Well, from what I've been told, Dickie Lee Hollinghorst has the upper hand a little bit. But make no mistake, this is really, people aren't going to be paying attention to this so much unless you're a political insider like, say, Vic or I. But this is a really important vote to determine where the Democrats are going in the legislative party. Because Hollinghorst and Pabon are two different kinds of Democrats. Hollinghorst is what you might call a more traditional liberal Democrat. She has fought for increased environmental regulations. She has fought against tax breaks, such as things like rolling back the enterprise tax break a little bit in a bill a couple of years ago. Pabon, meanwhile, might be considered more of a Hickenlooper Democrat. He is socially liberal, but he has been largely fiscally, if not moderate fiscally, pragmatic, which was also the same tone that Mark Ferrandino cut for much of his time as Speaker. He backed a couple tax breaks last year, for example. And the question is going to be, which way do you want to go? Do you want the Polis Democrat, because Dickie Lee Hollinghorst was Polis's liaison to the oil and gas talks this summer, or do you want someone who can be seen as the Hickenlooper Democrat leading a House at a time when the Senate is really in flux and may go Republican or Democrat this year? Again, I've been told Dickie Lee has the upper hand because of her status and maybe because of her gender as well. Democrats have never had a female speaker, and it might be a chance to make a statement there. But it'll be interesting to watch how this behind-the-scenes battle goes.
Vic, obviously, Ed makes good points about two different kinds of Democrats. If the election is tight and they retain the majority, but it's tight, do you think that sways in one direction or the other?
I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, I think Democrats are going to have to ask themselves which is more important, having a female speaker or a Latino speaker. I mean, and in that sense, Democrats are frankly in a good position. They really can't go wrong. I mean, politics aside, they really can't go wrong with either one. Pabon is young and smart, and he bucks his party sometimes, especially on business issues. Hollinghorst served directly under Speaker Ferrandino. She's sharp and experienced. So it's that classic Democratic demographic battle, women and Latinos. And I think Dems feel that they're in a good spot here, regardless in terms of window dressing, if you will. Highlighting their diversity no matter who holds the seat.
Patty, what do you think?
Well, the most important seat in this debate is who's going to be in the governor's seat. Because if Beaupre winds up as the governor, all bets will be off on who. It won't matter all that much which of these two is in position. But if Hickenlooper is there, and will he have the Democrats feeling their oats if they manage to keep the houses? Will they be pushing for legislation he's going to be fighting back for? He's going to be leaving his legacy, setting that up. Who will be running as a Democrat 4 years from now for the governor's chair? So there's so many different dominoes that will have to fall before we really know who will get that post and who it's important to have that post. In both these cases, neither of them have the baggage we've heard about for being difficult to work with, for being too dictatorial. So I think either one could be a win.
David, wrap it up for us.
Parties often have the choice of, do we pick the leader who's 100% firebrand for us for, say, that 55% of the most ideological part of the caucus on the issue, or do we the guy whose voting record is 98% right, but just not as hardcore? And sometimes when you do the first thing, it doesn't work out well, as when the Senate Democrats picked John Morse rather than Pat Stedman. But as others have said, that was also something of a personality issue, more of Morse's dictatorial style than of his ideology.
Well, let's get to our very favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. Patty, as always, start us off.
Well, as we know, it takes a very long time for a death penalty sentence to be executed in this state. It also apparently takes a long time for a death penalty TV show to actually air. Finally, CNN is going to supposedly show their Nathan Dunlap segment Sunday night, conveniently opposite the Broncos. But we did watch an early one, and unfortunately it doesn't really move the discussion of the death penalty much further. And let's hope that sometime in the next few months, it's unlikely to happen in the next 2 months during the debate, we actually have an intelligent discussion of the death penalty.
David.
with all this attention on Stonehenge, which President Obama was visiting today, nobody's paying attention to Carhenge in Alliance, Nebraska, which is like Stonehenge, but it's even better because it uses large old automobiles. People ought to focus on our native Midwestern henge, the finest of all henges.
Brought to you by the Nebraska Tourism Board. Ed, you're next.
It's becoming increasingly jaw-dropping to see the people who are arguing that ISIS is not some sort of threat to this country. I mean, at this point, if you look at their funding, if you look at the speed at which they're taking over villages, if you look at their tactics and persecution, they're making early forms of Al-Qaeda look like the Boy Scouts. This is a very dangerous group, and people who are saying they aren't really need to look closer into this.
Vic?
Disgrace of the week. Any one of you out there who picked Ray Rice on your fantasy football team? The guy beats his girlfriend and gets 2 weeks suspension. You know, I mouthed off in class in high school and got a bigger suspension than that. Shame on you if you picked Ray Rice.
Say something nice about somebody, always the toughest part of the show.
Well, we learned this week that we're going to be paying $80,000 for the independent study of the Sheriff's Department. If you want to get your viewpoint in, you can do it for free tomorrow. The mayor is doing cabinet in the community at Manual High School. So get out. They're doing a presentation at 8 to 9:30, I think, on the Sheriff's Department, and then getting into other issues. But you can get out and hear it for free.
David.
Some good news from the world of elected sheriffs. The Larimer County Sheriff's Posse won the recent competition of horseback riding and shooting against the posses of some of the other Front Range sheriffs.
Ed.
You know, I scrolled down how I wanted to say something nice about departing DIA CFO Patrick Heck, who's done incredible things for the airport. But I'd feel like a heel if I didn't take this time to really give lauds to my wife, Denise, who brought our son, Lincoln, into the world a little more than 3 weeks ago. Thank you for all you do.
Well played, Ed. Vic.
I'm going to say something nice because I never get to do it about the Chicago Cubs. Believe it or not, they had one of the best records in baseball in the month of August, and they're off to a great start in September. They have the youngest farm system in all of baseball, the youngest group of talent, and maybe sometime in the next generation they'll get over that 108-year hump.
I think we found our new CIO optimist. This is great. That's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. For our viewers watching our live stream on our website right now, stay tuned for a special behind-the-scenes segment. And for our broadcast viewers, we'll see you next week. And don't forget to check out our web-exclusive CIO postgame at cpt12.org every Friday afternoon. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Ryan, he's doing the EIC, that's engineer in charge. Some people call it engineer in command. Basically, he's going through making sure the color's right on the cameras.
How's it going?
Before the show, Ryan goes through and calibrates all the cameras to make sure they all match each other. And then we set the iris. And then during the show, what he's doing right now is he's going through and fading the lights to make sure different people's skin tones all look the same, so that the brightness of the skin all looks the same. Making sure the angles of the lights are correct, the backlight is hitting right, the key and the fill light are hitting right.
My name is Patrick Logan. I do the graphics for Colorado Inside Out. I like squirrels. So basically what I do here is make sure all the guest titles are correct and all the credits are correct, and then bring them in during the show. The hardest parts about credits and the graphics is to make sure that they're right. You have to be on top of spelling and grammar, and I try to be pretty good about that, but it is very noticeable if something is spelled wrong or something is used the wrong way. I like squirrels.
So this is Gabrielle Bryant, the producer of Colorado Inside Out. So if I sound like I know what I'm saying when I'm on the program, it's because of Miss Bryant's work. And it's also due to this little gadget, our teleprompter. She's back here running the prompter, making sure that I'm saying the right things at the right time. And if I ever look confused, it's probably because something's gone wrong with the teleprompter machine. I also come back here, and if we need to make any changes, this is where I would dictate exactly what I would need to say on the show, and then I would leave. Gabrielle would ignore that and go with what she felt was right.
And everything's really easy. If I need to change anything, I could just go here and make my little additions and change whatever I need to change. So I hit this here, and then it will allow me to put the prompter up in the monitor there. So that'll give Dominic an opportunity to see what's there. So hopefully we never have any Ron Burgundy issues.
I'm Dominic Dezzutti. We want to avoid those Ron Burgundy moments, and it's key that if she's happy, then I'll get the right information. And also, if I'm running late in the program, she can show me how much time we have left, which I'm always giving very good time, right? I've never run late on this program.
Everything,
Exactly.
he has everything all together.
It's payday in a couple days, which is why she's keeping very legit. Usually I'm pretty late in the program, but she's
Yeah,
kind.
it's really fun. I mean, I can always have fun with it, and I can make it go super, super fast if I need to, or slow it down, confuse him a little bit, but yeah, this is where everything is controlled, so.
Exactly. This is why they call it the control room, with Gabrielle at the controls.
There's a lot of subtleties that happen for all of our positions, and we all have to kind of gel together to try and make the best show that we can.
Got a show to do. Got a show to do. Okay, get the camera in my face.